I am your union president at ARC, and today I'm really thrilled to let you know that we have our union president and our VP of instruction at ARC here as well as a whole bunch of wonderful, as well as a lot of deans and faculty members. And I think the first thing we'll do is you probably want to know a little bit about you and also about the panel members. So what we will do is we'll go around and have the panel members introduce themselves quickly, and then we'll go around the room and have you introduce yourselves. Before we start, though, I want to thank all the area stewards. If you're an area steward, can you please raise your hand? And if you're a college rep, can you please raise your hand? Thank you so much for being here. And so let's start with Roger.
Hi, everyone. I'm Roger Davidson. I'm the Dean of Mathematics here at ARC.
I'm Tony Barcelos. I'm from the Mathematics Department. I'm a 30-plus year veteran of the school. It took me 5 times interviewing to get my job, so I know where a lot of you are. I started as adjunct at CRC, so I've been in the district for quite a while.
I'm Diana Hicks, and I'm the Dean of Humanities, but I used to be in English, and I probably did at least that. And I can't tell you how many times I was also a second-round candidate, so I felt like it was always a bridesmaid, never a bride kind of thing. So, but once you kind of learn the system and figure it out, it's easier to show your best.
And I should say, Diana was our union president at ARC for many, many years, 10 plus years, or close to 15 years. So it's great that she's here as well and in a new role as my dean.
I'm Lisa Lawrenson, and I'm Vice President of Instruction. I was a tenured English professor and a multicultural humanities professor, but not here at ARC. And I've been here for 12 years, but I always like to tell people I attended preschool here, and I also prepared my general education here at ARC. So I've been here a long time, off and on.
And Dean is my former dean. See, we have one.
Once you grab it, you can't. You don't play. I'm Dean Murakami, president of the illustrious college faculty union here, and also I've been teaching psychology for 27 years. So I always tell people when I do these sorts of things, we see them a lot. The average full-time faculty member spends about 26 years in illustrious. So, once we get you, we never let you go. But it's a fantastic place. That's the bottom line. This is a great place to work. People are fantastic everywhere. So, and very, very dedicated and very proud to be part of it.
I'm Dan Crum. I'm a librarian here at AR. I just want to say, in addition to the list, in addition to these positions, we are having a full-time librarian position also.
It's on the back. Yeah, it's listed.
Was it on there? Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm not a good reader because I missed it. I apologize. Okay.
My name's Allie Joy. I'm in the ESL department, and it also took me, I think, maybe on my 4th try, I got hired full-time. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. Really, there is.
Hi everybody, I'm Doug Herndon. I'm the Dean of the English Department, and it suddenly seems relevant to tell you that I was only ever an adjunct when I taught, and I went from adjunct to administration. So.
Let's go around the room.
Next weekend, I am teaching in the biology department here at AR, and started being adjunct in 1991, so I still have a friend still adjunct. I need this workshop.
We need you here.
My name is Shadi Marconi. I practice internationally around Canada and master's degree in biomedicine. I've been a guest lecturer many times here, and I would love to join the lesson time.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Adrienne Ellis. I've been a student here for roughly 7 years, and I teach here concurrently as an ED with my high school job that I teach at full time, and in the math department, teach math. And this school, I need this workshop. I've applied numerous times, but only ever had one interview. This is very competitive, so definitely interested in being here more.
I'm Beth Verhage, I'm an adjunct BSL, and I'm the part-time, ARC's part-time for LRCFT. I'm Dawn Miller, and I'm recently retired this month, and I've always been in corporate learning and development, so I'm kind of looking at the ways of retirement that adjunct might do.
I'm Sayur Parthania. I've joined in anatomy and physiology since 2016, but I haven't waited to become full-time.
My name is Dominic Belmonte. I never applied. It's my first time ever coming to the campus. I'm a former administrator of about 15 years at UC Davis, and just looking for an opportunity currently in Sydney.
My name is sociology from everywhere in the district, and also
My name is Jamal Linnell. I teach in the English department now, but before I was teaching in the technical communications business department.
Well, my name is Amanda Brennan, and I teach in the English department.
Hello, my name is Erica McDaniel, and I'm an adjunct counselor at Sacramento City College and an instructor, and this is my 10th year as an adjunct. And I need help as well.
I'm Ann Jacobson, and I teach English at Saxon.
I'm Celia Hall, and I'm an adjunct librarian at CFC.
I'm an adjunct professor here at
Minority Open Nutrition Faculty, and also ARC, LRCFT, Union Rep, also the co-advisor for the Student Club Coalition for Undocumented Students and Allies here on campus. And also, I applied 4 times before I got the final position, so there's hope that happens.
I'm Angelo. I teach here adjunct BSL.
I'm Christina Zeiss. I am full-time faculty in speech language pathology assistant program.
Oh, right. Mark Rao, I'm a full-time professor here at ARC for many years. Like most people here, it took a few times to get through.
Thank you. So what we would do is we would like to invite Lisa to give an overview of the hiring process at ARC, which is quite similar to the process in those years in general at other colleges. So everyone, please give Lisa a big hand.
Hey, so welcome. First of all, I want to say I'm really happy you took time today to come and join us because we are very excited to see you here. And one thing that's important to know in this process is that as you're going through it, we're rooting for you. I like to let people know that because it can seem very distressing when you apply and you don't get an interview, or you get an interview and you're not called back for the second round, or you are in the second round and you don't get the job. Just know that there's nothing wrong with you. It's a very competitive process. Our college is very competitive. And what we're going to do today is try to give you a sense of what that process is based on our collective experience, some advice for you that can help assist you as you're applying, and just some strategies. And we're talking specifically about ARC's process. One thing I do want to mention is you're going for other positions in the district. Each college has a similar process, but it can vary in terms of what happens in the second round or what their process is like. So we're speaking specifically to ARC's process. So how many of you know, you have the list of positions, right? Because we're all given that. How did those positions come to be this year? Why those positions? Why those departments? Does anybody know that process? Yes.
So the departments put in a request based on FTE, and then the Senate ranks them, and then the administration chooses which one, and then the district has to approve it.
That's pretty good. Very close. Our process is that the Faculty Senate at ARC will take those recommendations, and those could be based on retirements. In some cases, maybe somebody retired 3 years ago, but now the department's decided they want to go ahead and hire that position. Technically, that's, at this point, a new position, considered a growth position, but it's really a replacement position, even though we can't call it that. I know it's kind of silly. So we take all those collective interests of new growth or replacement positions, and let's say we had 18 people that retired or left the district in our faculty positions at AR. We would be eligible then for 18 FTE, but that doesn't automatically mean that if we had, let's say they were all English teachers, that we wouldn't automatically rehire 18 English teachers. Because it may be that enrollments dropped in that area, it might be that the disciplines changed, other things can happen, and the result is that we've decided we really need a sociology position instead. And that the English department decides to only ask for 17, something like that. So each of the departments, they look at their statistics of full-time to part-time ratio, and what is the ratio supposed to be? Anybody know? 75-25, 75% full-time, 25% adjunct. That's the desired state that we are trying to get to for a variety of reasons I won't go into because that will take us a while to discuss that. But what's important for you to know is those numbers are looked at very seriously because we want to make sure that we are ensuring that there's an opportunity to have full-time faculty. And I taught in Washington State, and I always like to mention this to people here at our college in California. Guess what the ratio is for adjunct and full-time in Washington State? Let's take a guess. It's even worse than the reverse. 90% adjunct, 10% full-time. So think about how hard it is if you're an adjunct to get a full-time position. It's nearly impossible. I mean, if you start as an adjunct and you end up as a full-timer, it's pretty miraculous. Very, very difficult. And also, I should mention this, is that adjunct faculty are not even guaranteed a class beyond each semester. So you would never know what you were going to have the following semester. And if, as a full-timer, if I wanted to take somebody's class, I could just take it. Which I would never do that. But I know there were people who had that happen, they were ready to go and their class was taken. So what's good about our district, there's lots of support, and I think in California there's lots of support that for our adjunct faculty to become full-time faculty members. And I'm letting you know that because I think it's important for you to know that. You have experience is valuable. You have lots of things that you can bring to our departments, and what we want to do today is help you to communicate that in your interview process and not to sell yourself short. So I think that's important. So once we get the, I'm going to go back to our process. So you get the list of all of the positions, and they're ranked by the Faculty Senate. The instructional deans get the same list of all those positions that have come forward. We look at the data and we rank them. Those two lists are then given to the president, and in consultation with the academic senate, a list is determined based on those. Usually those lists are pretty close to each other. Sometimes if they aren't, we've got to negotiate in the middle there to try to find a list that makes the most sense, again, based on ratios, the college needs, and so on. So then, if let's say we requested 25 positions, I can't remember how many it was this year, quite a few. I think it was something like that, 25, 26, you guys remember? Something like, pretty long. But we were eligible for 18 positions. So my job then is to take that list, go to the district, and I have to compete with the other DPIs to hang on to our 18 positions, and if possible, get more positions, which is what I've done 2 years in a row, get at least one more. Which is important because I'm trying to help our faculty to make sure that we have as many full-time faculty as possible. We are the biggest college in the district, and when I look at the need that we have, that's why I'm doing it. It's not because I'm trying to win, it's that I'm really looking at the needs that we have compared to other colleges' needs. If I felt that by looking at their statistics they really needed it, I would back off, because that's part of the negotiation process as being a sister college. So at that point, I take the positions that we agreed upon, take those to the district. We got 19, so we go through 1 through 19 on that list, and that's what we see before you. The reason the librarian position, it's actually not on that list, I just looked, Dan. That's a re-advertisement, so that's probably why it's not on the list, but we do have a librarian position as well. So I think it's important for you to know where those come from, because some people think, well, gosh, this person retired, how come we're not replacing them? Or why are there 3 of those positions and only 1 of these? So I think it just helps you to see that the faculty are driving that process. Diana as dean thought, well, gee, we really need to have a humanities position. She can't bring that forward. It's coming from the faculty. She could talk to the department and say, this is important for you to look at. But they're the ones who are presenting those positions. Okay? So then what happens is, what you have before you now is the list. So we create the hiring committees, and do you know who determines the faculty members on a hiring committee? The faculty senate. So I've already sent our entire list to the faculty senate asking for appointments. So what will happen is the department chairs will work with their departments, and then they collaborate with the dean and make recommendations to the senate president, who will then appoint the faculty members. The same is true if there's a classified representative on a position, that would go to the classified senate, and then I appoint the manager, and always the manager of the area will be on the committee. So for math position, Roger's going to be on the committee. He doesn't chair the committee, however, it will be another administrator. So usually it's an associate vice president. This year we have a dean who will be chairing the majority of our hiring committees. Okay? So the committee will be made up of the chair, the dean of the area, faculty members appointed by the Senate, and usually a classified representative, but not always. And that's, again, dependent on whether or not the position is one that works closely with classified. So for example, in a science position, there are frequently IAs and lab assistants that are helping you. Typically, those folks would be invited to serve on committee, one of those folks. On any committee, it will always be the bargaining unit for that position who has the majority of the members. So if it's an administrative position, there will be more administrators than faculty. For a faculty position, there are more faculty than administrators or staff. Okay? So it's another fundamental principle. So roughly, you can count on a committee being anywhere from 8 to 12 people. I think 10 is a good average number. A lot of people are shocked by that when they first walk into the room. So I'm just letting you know, it can seem kind of intimidating when you walk into a conference room and there are 10 people there. And oftentimes we look a little stone-faced, but that's part of our process, that we can't say, hey, Joe. So even if I do that in the hall to you, I can't do that in that process. So don't take that personally. Just know that we can't say that to you, and then the next candidate who we don't know, we just sit there stone-faced, right? So we try to be as consistent as possible and just be neutral, because that's our goal. Okay? Then we, before we invite candidates in, what we do is we draw the committee together, and we go through interests, so what we're all looking for in this position. Then by looking at the job description, we create the screening criteria. And why would the screening criteria need to be tied to the job description? Okay, and what's important, let's say I wanted somebody who was really strong in learning communities, but we didn't tell them that in the job description. How are they going to go to tell us that, right? That's an important clue to use, because you should look at that job description very carefully. The questions and the screening criteria will be based on the job description. It's required to be, so it's really important that you're looking at that. So we create screening criteria, and then we create questions as well. All of that has to be approved and finalized before any applications are looked at. Okay? Yes? Do you want to add about equity rep? Sure. Why don't you? Oh, well.
That's your
Okay, so yeah, I forgot a very important committee member. Thank you. On every committee is an equity rep who is trained in our equity process and who is monitoring the equity of the process of that committee. And that person is appointed by our equity officer. So it's true for every single committee. Okay, and it is a really important role. The other piece is that every committee member who sits on a hiring committee has to be trained with what we call hiring the best. So they're also being equity trained in terms of what kinds of things we're looking for, what is the legal process, and looking at equity and hiring. So everybody around that table will have some form of training, but the equity representative's job is to make sure that the questions that are being asked are equitable, that candidates are being treated equitably, and I'll explain later how critical that role is, because that person and the chair work very closely together in the process. So once all the criteria are finalized and the questions are finalized, the pool is released to the committee. And faculty 3 to 5 have to screen. They have the option to, but faculty usually will screen because this is their calling, right? So very rarely would a faculty say, no, I don't want to screen, but sometimes they do. But usually they go ahead and screen. The equity representative is required to screen, the chair typically screens, the dean will screen, and they will read all of the applications and then rank them based on the screening criteria that are created, okay? Those screening criteria are not shared. So it's not like they're in the hallway saying, hey, did you read Joe Smith's application? We do not do that. We have strict rules about the process. We do this individually. You're doing it in your office or on your computer somewhere, writing these things down on a spreadsheet. Those are submitted to the chair, and only the chair and the equity representative see those results. Okay, so Roger would not know what Tony's number one candidate would be.
Can I just add into that?
Sure.
When we on the committee, when we're doing the screening process, we're doing it based on the application. If we happen to have known you for the last 15 years in the classroom, oh, Jane forgot to mention that she's doing such and such, she didn't write that down in the application. I'm sorry, we can't include that in the screening process. It's not from the application. At that point, we really, in order to be equitable also, we are working off the application.
Very good.
Write it like you're writing to people you don't know.
Yes.
So that you share everything.
That's
Because
critical.
the
That's
committees
critical.
are as large as they are, there will always be people on there who have no idea who you are. The colleagues from your department that you think they know me and they like me and they'll support me, if you don't say it on the application, they can't take that into account, those qualities. And the people who don't know you, they have no chance of rating you on those things. It has to be in an application as complete as you can.
Yeah, and that's really critical. And again, I didn't mention, I've chaired well over 100 committees at this campus. I've chaired most of the faculty hiring for years before I was BPI. I've only been BPI for just shy of a year at this point. So I'm mentioning that because I would chair 12, 13 committees at a time. I was screening all of the applications. A committee for English could have as many as 150 applications. Math could be anywhere from like 80 to 180. It's a lot. So when I'm reading through those, and let's say I don't see one of the items that are listed, I can only dig so far. I always tell people I'm not an anthropologist digging for information, right? Especially the English person on English applications, I expect that information to be clear and upfront. So very important. Don't think, well, I said that on page 14 of my resume, or that's clear by my publications at the end of this. We may never see it. The application is very important. A lot of people, I think, shortchange themselves on the application. Take the time to put the things from your CV in the application boxes. It's very important.
I also might point out, the sheet that you have picked up, do you see that this is what, this is the criteria where and it changes from position to position. But the empty spaces on top is where all the candidate names would be. So you can see it's a point system. So based on what you see on how it meets a certain criteria, it's rated and valued and ranked. So that you can see if you completely miss a particular category or you underestimate what you think is important, you don't get as many points. So it is critical that you get that. So you might not ever get to the interview because you don't get the points.
Right, and there is the box on the application, if you haven't seen it, that asks you about an experience with diversity and equity. That is an extremely critical question, and I have read many that say NA. Literally, and I'm saying, or they might say, see my CV. It is a missed opportunity for you to make sure that you read the question of what's being asked, and then answer the question with examples. It's extremely important.
We value that particular question quite highly.
Yes, and I will tell you that with the screening criteria, there's always some criteria that has to do with diversity and equity. We're a community college serving an extremely diverse student population, right? So that shouldn't be a surprise. Dan and then Roger.
I was just saying, tying into the screening process, I discovered when I applied for something else in another college, I said, oh, yes, it's in my CV, it's in my resume or something. And luckily I happened to know the dean. I asked him the next week when I wasn't selected, even for an interview. He said, well, Dan, we couldn't tell from your cover letter that you did all these things. So now that told me, okay, in the cover letter, I will put at least one sentence of every single thing on that list. I won't assume that they know because, oh, that's on my resume. They'll assume that. If even it's just one sentence or two sentences, I will cover every single bullet under the required qualifications. I will not assume anything. I will bluntly put, just very strongly put it in the cover letter.
Why not go into the cover letter?
Janet,
What do you,
I would run for sex and then I can.
So I'll say, in that application, you get a little box for any of these questions, including the diversity question. And I didn't realize the first time that I applied that that box expands. Actually,
It grows.
and it's a really good idea to write it in Word with spell and grammar checker, and then when you're happy with it, cut and paste the whole thing into the box. We'll see there's some limit, but it's a big amount that you can actually state, and you shouldn't shortchange yourself there.
Diana?
So what do you think the cover letter's for? Yeah.
Attention.
What did you say?
To get attention.
Perhaps, yeah.
To possibly address what you're not asking on the application, to highlight, market yourself.
Or kind of going to what Dan's saying, think about, a lot of people think cover letter is one of those things that take part of a page. Well, thank you so much for, looking at my application. At a community college, that's not what it's about. It really is for explaining, what a CV can't explain. So you've got these things and you're talking about how you're working with these diverse populations, then why not explain what it is you're doing? Because before it was more of a list or a bullet. This is your opportunity to explain. And so if you start to look at those pieces, going back to what Dan's saying and how you're going to bring it into the cover letter, it gives you this complete snapshot of what it is you do. Then it gives us a chance to see it a little bit more in depth.
Ding.
I just say, be careful though, you don't want a 3-page cover.
That's what I was going to say. After the first page, I kind of lost
that's
interest.
done. So, I mean, but your job at this point when we're talking about is to get in that top 7 or 8 or whatever it is, right? Out of the 30 or 150, whatever that number might be, that's your job. And so what is it that makes you stand out and makes it stand out amongst all those other 150? Because, those 150 have probably also taught those classes that you've been doing. So that doesn't make a difference. What is it that brings you above that catches the interest? And the first time you have that opportunity is in the cover letter. So make sure it addresses the things in the job description, which is really important. Okay? But what else is it? What is else in your experience, in your life, that brings it above anybody else? And you'll have to think about that. But if you do, and you do it well, it'll catch the eye and it'll want me to look at your overall application. Oh, this person's really interesting. Let me take a look, and I'll look at that application a lot more seriously. The other thing that is also very important is that one of the things that when I'm screening applications is that I'm very concerned when I see holes in the application. So, for example, if you haven't worked for 5 years, you better explain that, because if you haven't, then probably I'm just going to pass you by, right? So those are things you have to explain. You can talk about you're gaining other experiences and other whatever. But you got to explain it. Do it in a cover letter or somewhere in your resume. That's extremely important. But again, this is the part that introduces you to us, and I'm reading, 50, 100 of them very rapidly. You got to catch my eye and my attention. That's what you have to do. And you've got to make sure that your resume and your application are all filled out well. They're well organized. It's easy for me to find all the information. I have a good organized idea of your educational background, your experience and other things. That has to hit me, right?
And I teach English as a second language, so maybe we're a little bit more uptight about it than other disciplines, but language does matter. And how well you write your cover letter and the time you take to express yourself on the application, because this is the first time I'm seeing anything from you. And if you haven't bothered to spell check and think about punctuation and skipping words here and there, then I'm going to assume that you would do the same thing on handouts that you give to students. So don't do it too quickly.
Think of your audience, because an English or ESL professor is probably going to take a 2-page cover letter versus, maybe math or psychology, where you're thinking, turning in a pitch, right? You know, so think of who you're writing to.
And fact check, make sure that what you're saying in the application matches your CV. I've seen any discrepancies. It's really important to fact check, make sure you're checking the years, make sure you're checking that your letters of recommendation say American River College, not Santa Rosa Junior College.
Yeah, that's the one that's always
Because
in.
we've seen that a lot, and I can't tell you how stressing that is, because we're like, really? You know?
I
So-
thought I'm the perfect candidate for Santa Rosa Junior College. I'm like, good luck.
It doesn't leave a good impression, just like what Allie's saying, that we're looking for folks who are going to teach our students. What does that say about being thorough, about communicating clearly in any discipline? So it's important. So I would also say that in terms of the cover letter and the application as a whole, my style might be to spend a little time on the cover letter, but I'm really looking at the CV. Somebody else might really focus on the application. All of those need to be thorough and complete and well organized. And sum up your experience. If you've taught at 5 colleges, but you have a cumulative experience of 8 years of teaching Writing 300, tell us. Because otherwise, we might be trying to add up how many semesters that is. Just give us that brief synopsis. It's very helpful in that cover letter. I've taught for this many years, and that actually is really beneficial to you. You can use that to your advantage. Have somebody else read it. Right? Give some advice. Go to another faculty member who's not on the committee and say, can you read over my cover letter? Do that with somebody at a different institution where there's not a position open. People are happy to give you advice, and I think it's helpful to get that critical eye on the things that you're submitting. Another thing that's important that we didn't talk about in the last workshop, but I want to make sure I mention here because I thought about it afterwards. For many positions, there are what are called supplemental questions. Supplemental doesn't mean optional. Supplemental, you need to fill that out. Okay? It's really important. That could be the difference of you being screened in or screened out of the process. And that's run differently at different colleges. There are different types of questions that are asked. But that wording supplemental makes it sound like, well, if I want to do it, I can supplement my application. No, the committee has specifically designed questions to help screen applicants, looking at things like experience or what your philosophy is in terms of that discipline or a variety of other things. Really critical that you fill those out and that you take those questions very seriously. So once we go through all of that, the screening process, all of this will be submitted to the chair and the equity rep, who would then, through a process again where we don't know how people have ranked anybody on the committee except for the chair and the equity representative. They would list the top 10 people, 8 people. It depends on how big the pool is, where the spread is. But I usually start with 10. So we put down Roger's top 10 in alphabetical order. And we do the same for Tony and Diana and so on. And then as we go through that process, we'll see like there are 7 votes for this person and 5 for this person and only 1 for this person. Through that process, then we pull from it the top 8 to 10, 12. It really depends on the discipline. Some disciplines like nursing, the pool could be as small as 6 people. Very hard to get nurses to apply. We often have to go out 2, 3, 4 times. As I said, an English pool could be as many as 150. So the spread tends to be wider. There are all kinds of issues that come into play, so I can't give you an exact number of how many are being interviewed, but it's somewhere between usually like 8 and 12 is, I think, a fairly good average. Then we invite people for the interview. And if you get that call, it's very important to know that the staff person you're working with, who do you think they work for?
The dean.
The dean is usually the chair of the committee or me. We're the president. And I can't tell you how many times I say, gosh, I called that candidate and the candidate was saying all this stuff and was like yelling at me on the phone. Remember who you're talking to, right? It might be stressful and you might be frustrated, but it's very important to remain professional because the staff will definitely talk. And they will talk if you come barging in the room and drop all your papers on the ground and you're freaking out. I mean, they're trying to calm you down, but I'm saying just know the process starts long before you come to the interview. Because if I hear from a staff member that you were being extremely rude and yelling at that person, that could be the AA now in the area that's going to be treated that way, or the IA in the classroom. So it's very important to keep your cool. Remember who you're talking to, be professional at all times. Because that person definitely has a voice, and we'll use it. So Once you come in, usually at our campus, what happens is you would receive a letter which would confirm the time, the date, the location, and you'd be giving a teaching demonstration prompt of some sort and some parameters of that. And then you invite the candidates in, and then you come in for the interview. And as I mentioned, there'd be somewhere between 8 and 10 folks at that interview process. We interview the candidates, and we'll talk in a moment about the teaching demonstration, some other aspects and questions that you could get asked. And I'm just going to run you through the rest of the process. We interview everybody. We do not discuss candidates between interviews. It's very much forbidden. If there's an equity situation, let's say Roger thinks that Tony said something that was unfair, he can report to the equity rep. I served as equity officer for 6.5 years here. I've stopped processes, I've gone out at conference, I've done all kinds of things. It's very important that we have an equitable process. Processes in our district will get shut down if there's an equity breach. It has happened, it hasn't happened to us, knock on wood, right? But we do take that very seriously. So I want you to know that, yes?
I just wanted to kind of put out there to be aware that like mistakes do happen and some things aren't mistakes. So I got called for an interview on Saturday. So that was just weird, it was Saturday. And then also I've gotten the wrong teaching prompt. So double check the prompt. I also was given the wrong time. And so they were like, "You're running late." And I was like, "What do you mean?" So you have to do the writing portion, and then afterwards you would like go to the interview. And so they gave me the time of the interview and not the writing portion.
Did that happen here? I hesitate to ask what happened here.
I'm going to say it happened in Los Rios. And so I just want you to like kind of be aware of that, and that like trickled on into the committee and whatnot. So you might want to just double check in a very like polite way about these different components of the process.
Now, we try in our process to be as thorough as possible so that doesn't happen, but mistakes do happen, you're right. So I would say it's perfectly fine if you get that letter to call and say, I just want to confirm that it's on, April 1st at, 2 o'clock or April 2nd.
That's a different DPI.
So then, after we've interviewed all the candidates, each person again will rank the candidates. Let's say there are 10, we'll rank them 1 through 10. Again, the only people who know those rankings are the chair and the equity representative. And then they would bring back the top 5 candidates. Sometimes it could be a tie, so it might be 6 candidates, whatever, but we'll just say it all worked out perfectly, and they discuss those top 5 candidates. Let's say that during the interview process, Roger heard a candidate say, well, I don't hold office hours because I think students don't need my help, and it's just a waste of my time, so I just don't do it. But let's say I was writing at the time and I didn't hear it. And that person's my #1 ranked person. Other people are going, yeah, I heard that too. I'm suddenly going, oh no, that person's ranked #1, I missed that. We do a re-ranking after we've discussed strengths and weaknesses. And that's important because we don't hear everything, right? How many of you have had that happen when you're on a committee and somebody says something? I've had it happen where I go, oh, I didn't catch that. It can really shape your thinking or make you think, oh no, or it might reinforce what you already thought in a positive or negative way. But that process is done in a way that we don't compare candidates. We don't say, well, I like candidate A's answer better than candidate B. We just talk about each candidate, strengths and growth areas, and record those. Okay? Let's say that Roger really liked the teaching demo and I didn't, we record both of those. We don't have to agree, it's not consensus building, it's just giving our impressions. After that, we re-rank the candidates, and then those top candidates are invited in for the interview. Again, it depends on where the numbers rank and so on and so forth, but typically we have 3 candidates that are put forward. On rare occasions, for a very small committee, I'll go back to nursing. There might be only 2 candidates. There might be only 1 because there was only 1 candidate who showed up to the interview and who actually the committee was recommending. I've had that happen maybe twice in all the committees I've run. It's extremely rare. The president has to approve that because it's really out of the process, but we don't want to go back out if we have a candidate who we think is viable and ready to do the job just because we only had 1. So, we try to do what's practical and reasonable. Then you get invited to the second round interview. Who participates in the second round interview is the president, I'm there as Vice President of Instruction. If it's a counseling position, it would be the Vice President of Student Services. Okay? The Dean, so for counseling, it'd be the Dean of Counseling. For math, it'll be the Dean of Math. And then the chair of the committee will usually be there, but not always. Kind of depends on our process. Because we have one this time around, that person's not going to be in the second round. So it will be the Dean, Vice President of Instruction, or Vice President of Students, and the President. You will get a call, and you'll be told that this is an informal process. And I don't like that. I mean, this is like my pet peeve. It's formal. Don't show up in your jeans. Know that you are now competing. You're one of two, one of three people vying for this position, right? You're a finalist. It's important and it's formal. And it will feel formal as you're sitting at the table being asked 10, 12 questions. So it doesn't feel informal at all. So I don't like that because it kind of sets you up for like, oh, we're going to have a handshake and a chit chat. It's formal. Yes?
I think one of the things that really got me great when I understood is that the reason that the first interview feels very formal is because as a committee member, we're not really allowed to do any back and forth with you because we're trying to, provide an equitable experience for every candidate. So when we say that the second round is a little more informal, it's really mostly because there can be a little bit more back and forth, but we are absolutely having you there for a second time to talk to you some more about what it is you do and how you do it. So yeah, anyway.
And the questions for second round are formulated based on the committee. So they can say, we didn't ask a question about teaching with learning communities, we want to know more. Whatever questions they have, they become part of the process. And then I also craft questions depending on the position. And I can ask you, if you haven't answered the question, unlike first round, I can ask you 5 different ways until you answer it.
Which you can't do in the first round. That's the whole equity aspect.
And that is important, and it's not to torture you, it's because we are looking to see what the sum total of your experience is so we can make an educated decision. The worst thing can happen is you exit that room and we don't know what we need to know about you to make our decision. It's really important, yeah.
I can leave in 5 minutes, so I've got a meeting I gotta go to, but let me just make a couple of points real quickly, and then I will leave it into their capable hands, because they're all fantastic. But a couple of things. One, I just want to mention that when you're going through the interview process, number one, it's a performance. You better perform. I mean, that's the bottom line. If you're somewhat reserved, laid back, whatever, that's not the time. You have to bring out your personality, you have to bring out your friendliness, your collegiality. All these things have to exude out of every pore of your body. Because believe me, if you don't perform, somebody else is going to perform, and then you're not going to get the job you want to watch. Okay? So it truly is a performance. And the only way you can perform extremely well is to prepare. You got to be prepared. And I always say that, you always should know, out of the 10 questions, you should really know 5 of them, probably more. And those are home runs. You should knock those out of the park. There should be no question about it. Because if you don't, then, it's just a shame on you. And that's one of the main things that happens to many of our longtime part-timers. They don't get prepared, even for the easy questions, which is really disappointing. So the easiest question that people don't get prepared for is the first one. What makes you the best qualified person for this job, and why do you want to come to Illustrious? As an example. That's a straightforward question. A lot of people just give a couple sentences and then they're done. Okay? That is wrong. This is your chance to introduce yourself, make you highlight what makes you special. Because you better do it now. Because this is the time, and I tell people, your first question, this is the first time that they really get to hear from you. This is where you make up your first impression. And first impressions last throughout the interview. So if you make a lousy first impression, the rest of the interview is going to be lousy. Okay? You got to make a great first impression, and that's what that interview question is all about. You better highlight what makes you special. Think about it. What makes you the best qualified person? Think about it. It's extremely important that you do that. The other one that you should knock out of the park is that you're going to get a question on ethnicity. You all know that that's going to happen. Ethnicity comes in many forms. It's not just our equity. It's just not ethnicity. It also has to do with gender, LGBTQ, age. There's lots of different biases that are out there. Equity means a lot of different things. And then the other thing is that you can address that question and you can go ahead and be really good at that, but you better demonstrate that throughout the interview. Okay, it's not just answer, oh, I answered that question really well, but you don't demonstrate that anywhere else in your interview or in your application, such as your cover letter. Show that it's there. And when you do the teaching demo, same thing. Can you use an example that involves something to do with diversity? That shows that it's just not, you just didn't prepare for that answer. It exudes in every part of your teaching and the way that you live your life. Yeah.
I have a question related to that. Are we able to bring anything in with us?
Usually.
Like one of the way I do diversity is questions on a lab exam where it has different traits that are relevant to certain groups.
It just depends on the committee, and you'll have to clear that. Sometimes people will bring in small things, but we don't really look at it.
Figure out how you're going to put it in answers. It really is what it amounts to, in the questions that are going to be asked.
And with teaching demonstration, you have it ahead of time. So I would say if it's something you would do in class normally, that's feasible within 10 minutes, because the teaching demonstration is typically 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes. You don't have a lot of time, so you don't want to spend 10 minutes setting up, right? If it's something you can do very quickly, I think it's a good demonstration of what you would do in the classroom.
Right. So we want to see how you communicate. You communicate on the level of our students. You look at your audience. You interact with your audience. What are your teaching skills? Which ones do you include diversity? All these sorts of things. This is where you teach them. That's another one. You should get out of the park. There should be no question about that. If you don't, then that just means you weren't prepared. If you did do all those different things that we were talking about, they'll elaborate more on that a little bit later. And then the other one, there's two others that you should hit out of the park. One of them is going to be a question about in terms of your specialty in your area, that subject matter. You should hit that one out of the park. The last question, you should hit that one out of the park. Are there any other questions that you have, or what else would you want us to know about you? You got to hit that one out of the park too. So out of the 5, out of the 10 questions, you should hit 10 of them right out of the park. No question about it. Okay. And then the other 5, you're not 100. You should be somewhat prepared for them, but. So for example, when it was during my interview, they had a question that wasn't in my mind, and there was the one question there that I really did not know. Didn't have an organized answer. But so while I was answering all the ones that I hit out of the park, I was formulating the other ones back in my head, and by the time I got to that question, because the questions are in front of you, I finally had a reasonably good answer. But if I had to only focus on those questions and that was it, and I had to put 100% of my effort into every one of those questions, I wouldn't have been able to formulate that and answer it in the back of my head and put something that was reasonably coherent on that. So that's the advantage. Other things that they'll ask you about a lot of times, and you should understand this if you ever want to talk to me about how to do this, but your strengths and weaknesses. That's oftentimes is a question out there. Do you really understand your strengths? Do you really understand how to answer? What are your weaknesses and how do you overcome them? And a lot of that has to do with your teaching style, trying to interact with your students, the diverse students that you have. How do you approach that? How do you overcome the difficulties that there might be in your classroom? That they're all interrelated, and you need to know. These things aren't discrete things. They're all interrelated to how well you will teach, how well you interact in that classroom, how well you will do with your colleagues, because that's the other end that we always want to know. How well will you interact with your colleagues? How collegial will you be? What do you bring to the table to the department? What do you bring to the table in the area that enhances it? We just don't want you to teach those classes and go home. I can get a monkey to do that, all right? What I need is someone. No, that's the joke we always say. But all I'm saying is that we need someone not only to do those classes, but to enhance and grow the department. That's part of the purpose of why we're hiring you. That was just a joke.
Thank you, thanks.
Although if you go to UC Davis, they'll say the same thing.
Thanks.
But I gotta go.
Okay,
Thanks.
Doug and then Tony.
Just one quick thing, because I have to run through, but I just can't sort of overstate the importance of being able to talk about diversity and equity and social justice in a pretty sophisticated way, from a broad social context to an academic context to an interpersonal context. I know that's extremely important to the faculty on my committees, and I can't imagine that is not the case all the way down the line. It really is one of the reasons we all feel good about working at ARC, because it's in the mission and the vision, and it's something that we talk about all the time. And we know that we need faculty who understand those issues, and we don't always, I do not look like the students that I serve, so I need to have as broad an understanding of those issues in service of my students. That's just a super important part of the deal. So I will leave you with that, and thank you.
He made a really important point about the fact that you can anticipate a lot of the questions. You should anticipate a lot of the questions. And you should prepare for them. You should rehearse them. You shouldn't memorize statements that you will just blurt out. You don't want to sound like a mechanized, over-rehearsed robot. But you should rehearse. And in particular, these sample questions, they are samples, but they're highly representative of the sorts of questions you actually see. And there's a guarantee that question one is an opportunity to introduce yourself. Remember, even if you're an experienced adjunct at this school trying to go to full-time, which is the case for so many of you, there are people on the committee who don't know who the heck you are. So you are not just reintroducing yourself to your colleagues in the department you want to be a part of. You are cluing in the other people who don't know anything about you or your department specifically to impress them that, yes, this is a person who can clearly do this job and is invested in doing the best possible job for the department and the school and its students. So that's question number one, where you introduce yourself. Dean is right. You should knock that one right out of the park, and you should have a complete, well-practiced, complete answer that you're going to give there. The last question, which is also very standard, where it says we've come to the end of the interview. Do you have anything else you'd like to add? Do you have any questions for us? Number one, if you have questions, keep them short. Don't ask dumb questions. We've heard dumb questions where people have said, do I have to arrive on time for all of my classes, or is there some leeway there? Don't ask stupid questions. I mean, literally stupid questions. You know better than that, but it's amazing what people do when they blurt out questions without having thought of them in advance. This question's going to come up. If you're going to ask questions about things like, will I have a mentor teacher to advise me and help me get adjusted to working full-time? Things like that are good. The other thing is, even if you don't have particular questions, is there anything else you'd like to add? Dean pointed out that you could use this question to backfill on a missed opportunity. So you go back and earn a few more points on a question that you might not have been completely happy with, and you thought some more and you came up with something better. That's where you do it. And then finally, you can add a brief closing statement about how you're dedicated to the school, you love the department, you want to be in the department more, you want to be there full time, and you are working really hard to qualify yourself to be the best full-time instructor you can be. So that as they thank you and lead you out, the last thing they know is that you made a very clear statement of purpose. When we get to this last question and say, is there anything else you'd like to add? And the candidate said, no, I don't think so. That's a very lame ending. You've got to have something to round it off. You introduced yourself, and now you're going to say goodbye, but you're going to say goodbye in a very positive way, so that as you head out the door, we go, yeah, that person is really engaged. Take advantage.
Alex and then Diana.
Well, I was going to get to the thing about the last question being the time where you have those second thoughts. But the other thing is, don't let the interview situation get you so nervous that you don't read the questions carefully. I guess it's standard where you'll come in and you'll do some kind of a writing sample for a certain amount of time, and then they'll give you the questions to look at for, 10 minutes?
It's 20 minutes typically for the writing sample, 10 minutes to review the questions.
So then, you can write, don't try to compose whole answers, but you have some time to write notes to those questions. But, if it's a two-part question and you leave off the second part because you're nervous, that's really painful to see. Especially when it's something
when you're there to, after you answer the question, reread it again, just to make sure. I see a lot of candidates do that. Let me make sure I covered all the parts of that question. Okay, I think I got it.
And you
Because we cannot prompt
Yeah, you can't ask us, have I answered the question?
But you can say, let me reread the question just to make sure I covered everything. Especially some of the committees will ask questions that are 3 or 4 parters, and I don't like those, but I will tell you some of them, might have been one that I was a candidate for recently, had it was like a novel of questions, and I'm going, are you kidding me? 6-part question. So it's okay to look at it again, make sure that you're covering it all.
And then the other thing, at least within ESL, we always have you do a teaching demo where we want you to pretend that we are your students. And of course it's fake and it doesn't, really feel like that. But don't just tell us what you would do for this teaching demonstration. Actually do it, teach it. We are your students, and yes, it's a little bit forced, but we want to see how, at least have an idea of how you interact with students.
Yeah, it is important for that. Stand up when you're doing your demo. I've seen a lot of people sit down. Don't do that unless you would do that in your classroom, and then I would say something about you as a teacher, right? I mean, they will seem awkward. You're in a conference room. It's kind of a tight situation. Stand up. And I would say, additionally, let's say you're a very dynamic teacher and you like to use a lot of collaborative techniques or something. I've seen a lot of people I've seen teach in the classroom come in and do the interview process, and they're just lecturing off of a PowerPoint, and I'm going, but they're telling me they're a collaborative teacher, but I don't see it. Think about the things you're saying in your interview and make sure you're demonstrating that. And as Dean suggested, if you're talking about inclusivity, you need to be thinking about equity within the curriculum and how you're representing that in your discipline, and make sure you know what you're doing there too, because I've seen that go south when people try to do that and they don't really know what they're doing, and that also tells us something. So just make sure you know and practice it. You've got colleagues, as I said, use them. Do some mock interview processes. It's very important for you to get feedback. It might feel awkward, and if it's odd, you can do it on the phone with someone. Just talking yourself through it can really help you so that it feels more natural when you get there. The other thing that is simple is breathe. Take some deep breaths before you go in there. I know it's nerve-wracking, but if you breathe, you really will calm yourself down. I feel so badly when I take candidates in because so many times people are sweating, they're trembling, they're nearly tripping over themselves. And we're rooting for you, so just breathe and try to be as calm as you possibly can. Know that everything you've done has prepared you to be there at that moment, and I would say be your authentic self. I always tell people, nobody can do you like you. And that is one of the most unique things that you bring, is your lens, your perspective. Bring that, that's what we're looking for. But it's important you communicate that to us so we know who you are. As a teacher, bring your passion. Some people come in and thinking, do they even care about students? They never mention students in the interview. And I think it's just because of the nerve-wracking situation, right? Why did you get into your discipline? Show some excitement about your discipline, about the students you're serving. Those are the kinds of things that committees get excited about.
So I'm going to punch back because I'm such a visual person. Do you remember the handout here, the second page, where it says sample interview questions? So you've heard a lot about the description of, how, you're supposed to elaborate and such. Look at the point process. Now keep in mind, there's this real tiny box, and actually we usually do it long ways, but we wanted to give you more questions and save paper, so there's still a skinny little box that all the panel is writing on. So if you see everybody stop writing, it should be a clue that maybe you're just reiterating the same fact, and that you actually do want them to be lots of notes. Now there'll be some not so that people who will wait to take notes, you'll be able to figure them out. But if you're really just looking at the committee not taking notes, you should say, look at that, re-look at that question and think, am I answering it? Because if you're not, there's no reason to keep notes. Because they'll write a note that says off topic or something, on to the question. Because if you look, there's a ranking, and then all of that based on the number, on the quality, and you don't get the details, we made it smaller, actually, I wrote this, but made it smaller, that had to do with 1 to 4, and it talks about the level of, it rates it, it gives it a word title. But then all those scores are added up, and then that part about the ranking process that Lisa was talking about, that brings it up. So it's not about, oh gee, I still like them. It's all based on score. It's very mathematical, and what raises you up that starts to look whether or not you make it to the next interview.
Yeah, some critical pieces, do not assume that we know you. You have to act like you've never seen us before. That is our process, and if you don't say it, I've had candidates come in for positions, I'll use an administrative example. People who have been here, as administrators in our district for over 10 years who never say that they've been an administrator in our district. We can't give them any points for that because they're not telling us what their experience is. You have to bring it. You've got to tell us. It doesn't matter if you've worked for Roger for 10 years. You still need to say, I've been working in this department, I've been teaching these classes, tell them what your expertise is. And as Dean pointed out, there are other people, I think it was Dean, who said, the rest of us don't know you. When I'm chairing those committees, it's very inoften that I know the adjuncts. I do for the areas that I've been a dean of, right? But I don't, like in mathematics, I don't know, well, I know some now, but in the past, I don't know everybody. So I have no idea who you are when you walk in the room. It's really important that you communicate those issues. Yeah.
The information that all of you guys are sharing is really, really valuable. And this piece that you're covering right now, that was my experience. Like I said, I've been with the district now 10 years at the same school. And so I've interacted with quite a few different tenure and classified staff as well. But this information here, I went in blinded, not knowing what you're sharing now, assuming that I didn't really have to sell myself or talk about certain things because I work among these people all the time. They know who I am. Another thing I didn't do is the description, the requirements, right? So I only talked about the education that I had that was based off the description. I didn't include that I had a higher level of education because my rationalization was, well, it wasn't required for the job. And I didn't know any of this until I was able to get feedback from people who had to be fair. They were trying to make sure it was fair. And they said, why didn't you tell them? I said, well, you guys know that. Why didn't you? Well, it's on my resume. Well, not everybody has time to read the resume. And so I walked away feeling defeated, like I'm never applying for anything again. But it was on me. And now I get it, but I really did not understand that then.
Yeah, the second part of that is the second round. Because a lot of candidates will come in the second round and they'll say, well, because we ask the same opening question, why do you want this job at American River College in particular? That's the first question that we ask. It's because it's kind of an icebreaker question, help you to calm down. Many candidates will say, well, I already told the committee in the first round, or it's in my CV.
Yeah, this is
Don't
their
do
chance
that.
to tell the president.
Yeah. Myself and the president, we haven't heard you yet, so it's a new game. You start all over again. And don't worry if the dean has heard it already. If they're used to it, they're expecting that. So say the same things. You don't have to come up with a new example. If we ask a similar question and you gave a great example in the first round, you can give it again. Roger's not going to say minus 10 because you gave the same example. It's okay to give the same example. So it's very important. The other thing is, I just want to say this about second round because I think this is important, and first round. Eye contact is very important. People get intimidated in the president's office. We sit at a pretty small table. And I see some candidates who just lock eyes with the president and they never look at anyone regardless of who's asking the question. So for me, as vice president, when I'm asking a question, the person's not even looking at me. And I'm also a person of color, and I'm looking at the person going, all I can say is I feel like the person doesn't see me at all. And that's a concern for me because that could be a student sitting there. So it's very important that you're using the skills that you would hopefully be using in the classroom, which is to use that eye contact, interact, pay attention to the body language, and people are like, pick the energy up, right? When you do that in the classroom, I would. So it's important that you're reading that and don't worry about, I would say, don't try to temper yourself too much, And I see a lot of teachers who come in a suit and they'll take their jacket off to teach, to do the demo. That's okay too. Try to be in your element, be yourself, but also pay attention to the room as a whole. So it's not only about the chair. Everybody's on that committee, and it feels awful in those committees, right, if people don't look at you. You feel completely invisible, just like your students would feel.
if they were on the receiving end of that. So Tony, and then we'll take yours.
I want to address the teaching demo again. Dean pointed out that's one of the items you have to do a really good job at. And it's kind of ridiculous that a 10-minute sample of your teaching style is a major component of what we use to decide if we want you to teach for us. But you have to make it work. There are a couple of huge mistakes people make. One is not rehearsing it. Number two is trying to do way too much, because we tend to think in terms of class periods, where you introduce and you develop and you interact with your students, you do examples, you take lots of questions, you maybe give them an assignment, they work in groups, and at the end there's a summation. No, you got 10 minutes. Or math interviews, we usually allow for 12 because we're so generous. Number one, rehearse. Number two, pick a vignette. Don't try going from A to Z. You can't do an entire lesson. Don't rapid fire through a lesson. That's not representative of what you do. We want a nice, meaty representation of something fundamental from the way you do things. Yes, it's more of a lecture-style format than it may be in a real classroom, but we want to see what you do. And so instead of going from A to Z, maybe you go from G to L. That's the sample that you're going to do. You might have a handout right at the beginning to say, now remember class, this is what we just did. Here's where we are, so you position yourself. Don't spend lecture time, sample time, setting the scene. Hit the ground running. The last time we did this, and now we're going to apply it this way. In a math class, you would let them, remind them about what they just did and what you're going to build on, whatever the discipline is. So you're moving right away into what you're doing. We always tell you, treat the committee like it's your class. And yes, it's fake. And yes, in a real classroom, you might have the highly interactive student or two who's really engaged, and you can use him or her as a mainspring to get things going. We're not that helpful. We're all acting like not really involved students. So, for example, in a math demonstration, you could be doing, oh, we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem. You're not going to say to a candidate, if you're on a committee, you're not going to say, oh, that should be the Pythagorean theorem. So don't ask the student, what theorem should we use? Because we're not going to tell you, that's too helpful. But if you say, okay, this is where we're going to use the application known as the Pythagorean theorem. Who knows this theorem? Well, the math professors on the committee will raise their hand, and the ABP will raise a hand too because they want to be involved. And that sort of interaction, you can get that from the committee. We can do the student thing that far. Call on people by name. If you want them to answer you, think of things that you can set up where you say, okay, now we can solve for this, we can solve for A first or B first. Lisa, do you want to do A or B first? Well, that's a harmless question. And so even a VP of instruction can answer that question. You're not asking for subject matter knowledge, but you are involving your pretend students. The other thing was, I mentioned the Pythagorean theorem. There's a version of that in Chinese mathematics. So you can point out the Greek name for this is the Pythagorean theorem. Did you know there's a predecessor in Chinese math? And that's harmless and easy to do to illustrate that there are different aspects to what you're doing. You can involve them without expecting them to really be like students in your classroom, but they will appreciate, we will appreciate being involved, called on by name, and when someone calls time, usually we give you a 1-minute warning. Well, maybe it got more interactive than you thought. Maybe you didn't get to where you wanted to. Don't try to rush to the end. Prepare to just draw your breath and say, okay, we have to stop right there. You've been warned not to meta-teach. Don't say, and then I would tell my students, blah, blah. No, you're doing a sample like it's in a classroom. Once you're done with the sample, now you're a free agent again. If you're sitting down, you have a couple of seconds while you're sitting down and you say, of course, the next thing we break into small groups and go from there because that's what I like to do to get them more involved. And we can take that into account and say, well, that was a good demo, and the follow-up is pretty good too.
And you could have a handout too.
And a handout, oh, by the way, put your name on the handout so we know who it came from. Because the committee gets tired and we're shuffling lots of papers, and we want your name on it so we know, who does this belong to? We don't have to ask our colleague. Do you remember who gave us the Pythagorean theorem handout?
Well, think of it as 2 full days of interviews, you know, one after the other. So, you know, you want to stand out and you don't want to lose paper.
Exactly.
And for the chairs and deans, it could be days and days of that depending on the discipline. Some of our
Did
deans
they
are
put their face on that handout? So that's what I wanted to say about the teaching demo. It's crucial.
Yeah, there's a couple of content pieces, and I'll take your comment or question. I just want to say it's important to note that you know your content. I have seen candidates come in, they were asked specifically to do a particular lesson, and they get it wrong.
Wow.
And need I say more? That person's not going to go to the next level, because the other content folks are going to say, you know what, I've seen this happen in a variety of disciplines and within the disciplines, but if you don't have that grammar point correctly, if you didn't calculate the formula correctly, if you made a mistake in a very
If
complex
you don't get a
question.
thumbs up, if it's a side, or down, if it's a side, that makes you wonder from the content expert.
Because we're looking for somebody who has expertise in that discipline, and if you're not demonstrating that and you have the question ahead of time, we have concerns about that. And I would say that some of the questions that get asked, you'll know ahead of time, run it by somebody else in your field. Make sure that what you're saying is correct. Do your research, go back, double check. It's really important. That teaching demo was critical. And I've seen people who were really good candidates make a mistake in the content. It's okay if you make a mistake when you're writing on the board and you, oh, wait a minute, you know, if that happens to every teacher, that's a different thing because you're catching it yourself. But if you come in with incorrect information in your discipline, you will not make it to the second round, I assure you. Yes?
So part of the process biases towards PhD candidates, you know, people that have PhDs. I mean, I know that you score higher if you have a PhD.
That's not true.
No.
That's not true. It is not biased toward that, and I will tell you that some committees actually frown upon a PhD. So it really can depend. For the way we've got to screen is, for many committees, it's just the min-qual, or it might be beyond the min-qual. And it could depend on the discipline, because if there's expertise needed for a particular class that would require PhD knowledge, then that might be considered that we would give that person extra points for having that. A lot of committees will have things that are beyond the master's degree. It could be another master's, it could be additional training, it could be other professional development opportunities, certificates, online teaching experience, all types of other experience that would give them that additional edge. So it's important to list those things on your resume if you have other types of training. You've gone through the Online Teaching Institute, you've gone through the Collaborative Skills Workshop. These types of things you should definitely have in there because that counts as part of your training.
Many PhDs do not make it through the paper screening. I usually give a point or two for subject matter knowledge because they've earned a doctorate, but that's not definitive for a candidate because if he or she sends us a resume or an application that has pages of CV material on what they've published and the research they're doing and the research they're planning, they don't know what they're applying to. They are definitely going in the wrong direction, and we're not interested in them. We're looking for teachers.
Yeah, I think
about education isn't always just your master's degree or your PhD. There's all the things you do for continuing ed as well. I mean, education is what are you doing to stay up on things?
But if you do have one, you should list it. It's not that we frown upon it.
No, it's not.
But I would say that what I learn often on committees are, does this person want to be in community college? Is this person interested in only researching? Do they know our students? We're not going to be asking questions I'll just use my discipline in English, that would be teaching like in a Whitman seminar. That's not going to happen in a developmental English class or a 300. You know, we're looking specifically, can you work with our students? It may be that your PhD is something that can inform you and you can do that. That's great. I mean, so I would say we're not going to give somebody a minus, but
Use it appropriately.
Yeah.
Lisa knows that, because this is a few years ago, but she heard me say it the other day. In the math department, we actually received a cover letter for an application where the candidate said, and it was a PhD, this person said, I am willing to come teach at your institution until something more appropriate to my level of training comes along. And it was abundantly clear that this candidate thought we would be crying tears of joy that this candidate was willing to debase themselves to the point that they would come to a community college until they found a better spot. We didn't pass that around, but we were laughing. And the tears were not of joy. This person
The doctorate is not a deal maker, and it's not a deal breaker.
That's right.
I did it specifically because nowhere in this district is a research methods class taught in sociology. That's likely you have to go through your PhD to have the opportunity to teach that class. So if you put that on application, I can't speak to being able to teach that class. I would never have the opportunity.
But we also look for potential too, because everybody sitting in this room, including myself, somebody had to give me the chance to demonstrate that I could teach. So I would say as vice president, I don't expect that everybody's taught every level. I don't expect that they've had the opportunity. And I think that if you can, in an interview situation, communicate that, or in your cover letter to say that I've taught these classes, we can see it. A lot of adjuncts don't have the opportunity. They might get the last classes on the schedule. So even though you have expertise in a certain area, you don't get to teach it. You can say, I have this expertise. At this point, I've been offered classes in this area, but I also have the ability to teach this, this, and this. We can see that by your experience, by your credentials, by your level of interest. So there are lots of folks that we've hired to teach things that have never taught that particular class, that particular level, that particular strand of VSL, or, but it's about the potential to do it based on what they've demonstrated in the process.
It's the question over here.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, is it okay? Oh, so I actually have the opposite question, which is, of course, there's no way for me to know, but I am concerned that having a doctorate, my sort of application was met with a bit of skepticism in the past, and I don't know how to do anything other than express genuine interest, enthusiasm, and presence.
What discipline was it again?
In English.
Oh.
So when you say it was met with skepticism, what kind of?
No, I said I have no idea. I said I don't know that, right?
Yeah.
But I guess that would be my concern because I haven't.
Your job in whatever your discipline, whatever your degrees are in, your job is to translate how that training experience has brought you to teach our students. I mean, whatever the level is, if it's a related master's, we have people who received, I can't think of the word, EQ'd into a discipline. What we're interested in is, can you work with our students? Can you teach our students this class? Even if you're capable of teaching 600 level class, it doesn't really matter if you can't teach developmental 101, because that's what we need. If you're brilliant at calculus, but what we have for classes are basic arithmetic, we need you to be able to convey that. So we'll just kind of go down the road here. Okay. Your first one.
A suggestion, I think it was brought up, what the Phoenix was saying, you guys have, the adjuncts here have an advantage because what you can do is ask a colleague in your department what was the narrative that they used for asking for the position to be considered, going through the prioritization process. If you can take a look at that, you kind of get a sense of what the department is looking for. And I was thinking, it jogged my memory because especially in sociology, I remember the prioritization request, the narrative, which is public information, as that they are looking for research methods because the district does not have a course right now, but they're looking for that. So if you have that, it might have been in the application, I don't know. But if you can bring that up because you have the chance to look at the prioritization narrative, it gives you a little up over other people. So getting to know what was in that.
And it may be a passion for research methods. It doesn't have to be, because if somebody has passion for one area, but they have experience doing this, we see the connection. If you can teach that and you have this passion and this training in this area, it makes sense that you could do the other. But again, you have to help us see that because it might not jump out at us in terms of your cover letter and in terms of your materials. You, Tony?
Well, I can tell you that when I first started applying and not even getting invited to interviews, I found out that my application was being regarded as scant. Not because I had a doctorate, because I didn't. It was because all of my teaching experience, for which I got some citations, it was great. It was at UC Davis. I had been a teaching assistant. I had been teaching lots of different courses, mostly calculus, and one algebra class before they stopped offering those. And so I was told very specifically by a math dean at one of the Los Rios colleges, well, they look at your application, you taught nothing but UC students. Can you teach our students? Because they have a lot more diversity. And this was part of a conversation I had with this dean when she called me up and said, do you want a job in Los Rios? And I said, yes. And she said, well, you need to come work for us first. As an adjunct, I had a day job, which was perfectly fine. I didn't want to give it up until I could get something full-time. She said, you need to teach adjunct for us and get some community college experience. All of you who have community college experience can say, absolutely, you know our student population, and you've already demonstrated that you can teach our student population. When I didn't have that, they weren't interviewing me. After a couple of years of teaching at Cosumnes River, I had that experience and I was regarded much more seriously, and I started getting more interviews and eventually lucked into an actual full-time position. So address that. The degree that you have up front is not a problem unless you're like the guy who wrote us and said, I have these wonderful academic qualifications. No, we want teaching qualifications. We want minimum qual or better. If you've got a degree that's more advanced, at least show us it enhances you rather than distracts you. It hasn't made you into a researcher who's looking for a job we can't provide you. You want to teach, and you can teach our students, and all of you can.
So I had a similar experience because my PhD is in engineering, and the job that I held before becoming Dean of Mathematics here was a tenure track mathematics position at another college and district. And so I had to be EQ'd in, and the best advice that I got when I was applying, because I had met another faculty member who's already working at Sierra College actually, and she said, the thing that you have experience out the wazoo, and you have qualifications out the wazoo, but what's not coming across is that you want to come and teach our students, that you have a passion for that. And I said, but that's why I got my PhD in the first place, right? I just went into industry and worked the places I did because I couldn't afford to be a teacher at first. Because I had all those loans to pay off. But once I sort of understood that that's what, in the community college system, that's what we're looking for, that's what we want to know we're bringing in, because we're all about the student experience. And then I could convey that. Then I knew how to speak to that. And all of those other things fell into place. The other thing that I wanted to mention earlier to echo Diana's point is that if you see us checking out for whatever reason, it is probably a clue to sort of wrap up that question. I've seen candidates come in and 45, 50 minutes for the whole interview? And I've seen candidates come in, more than one, and take 20 minutes answering the first question about what qualifies you for this position. Like after 10 minutes, I get it. You're qualified, right? Don't take up half your time boring me to tears.
That's
fine. So manage your time, because you've got to cover however many questions there are in whatever it is, 45 to 50 minutes. So you've got 4 to 5 minutes minus the demo. So really 3, right, roughly per question.
That's why practicing is so important, because that timing is critical. I have seen candidates take, again, I've seen them take 20, 30 minutes on the first question, and then they have to rush through the rest of the time to get through 9 questions. And so they really shortchange themselves. I would say I've seen the other end of that, which is a hyper awareness. Oh no, I need to hurry up because I only have 2 minutes. Please don't do that either, because it makes us all nervous, And the reason this is important, do you not have to do that in your classroom every day? You're watching the clock, you know what you need to do, you're planning ahead, you're adjusting, well maybe I won't cover that part so much because they needed a little bit more with the first section. It's the same thing. So you know that you're going to get 10 questions, and you're going to have 50 minutes. And they are timed. And as chair, we cut you off. We have to, as part of the equity process. So nothing feels worse to me when there's a candidate who has such great potential and they get through 7 to 10 questions, because when you're being scored against other people, you're not going to make it.
Time management was one of my aspects to bring up. I just had a couple of the strategies or suggestions. I guess even for the application, also interview, read the college's website. Get an idea of, what are the main issues that we're doing here at AR. We have the vision statement. We bring up equity, and on that, we bring up guided pathways. We bring up other new issues. If someone's in the library field, if we ask you a question about information competency and you just have a blank look, we're kind of worried because that's a national thing. And that's not just specific to AR or something. There's some broad things you should know what's happening. Also,
Jen, real quick, on that, Warren, could you show them on the redesign site? Just click on that icon. This is on the homepage. If you go there, anyway, that icon, if you click on that icon, it will bring up our new strategic plan, what our current strategic goals are. That will tell you a lot about what the college is doing right this minute. So it's really important.
And I remember what I did when I was interviewing for other positions, I would ask to look at the accreditation report. You kind of get good background from reading the accreditation self-study. It just gives you a sense of what's, in fact, one college, I remember they presented us to take a look at. I'm like, that's a good idea, because that's what the accreditation self-study is. They're trying to prove to the commission, giving ideas. A couple other questions I think that would usually, maybe typical questions, classroom management, either, how do you deal with that student disputing a grade or unruly interaction or whatever, unruly behavior such.
Late work.
I'm sorry?
Late work.
Late work, how do you deal with those things? We have it in the library also, what about that complaining person or student or something. Dealing with colleagues, dealing with students, but also how do you deal with colleagues? A lot of times it's, situational. I guess the classroom management would be tied into situational. But I think those are typical questions to expect to be asked in the interview.
And if you don't know what the answer is, talk to your colleagues and find out. Because maybe you haven't had a problem yet. Maybe you're being proactive, but, then you need to be prepared.
A question that gets asked a lot is, have you had a difficult situation with somebody in your department? A lot of people, I see people freeze on that question. I think, and please jump in, personally, I like it when somebody's authentic and just absolutely tells the truth. I worked with somebody, it was difficult. This is, how we resolved it. This is what I learned from the situation, how I would approach it differently. We don't expect people to be completely perfect in their human interaction, but it is important that you have self-reflection and tools to manage that. I would also say be sensible. You don't have to tell your absolute worst moment when you were, yelled at somebody in the hallway and it was awful. So think ahead either, It's good to be honest, but also you are competing, so remember that as well, So you want to think about situations like that, or they might ask you when you have a difficult student. You don't have to tell the absolute worst story ever. Tell the absolute best story ever. Think about that, where you learned something, where there was a happy ending to it, because that's really what we're looking for. Because the reality is, you'll get difficult students, or there might be a colleague who you have difficulty communicating with. So what we're looking at is, how do you handle that? And I want to go back to the part about passion. For me, when I'm in second round, I'm looking for a lot of things, but if you can't work with our students, if you don't understand our student diversity, where we're going as a college, it's really difficult for me to say, yes, please come and join us, because those are our students. So sometimes I'll hear candidates talk about, well, I wish we had those students we had 10 years ago, or I wish, I want to have those students that are over at these other campuses. This is our student population. This is who we serve. And if you're blaming the students, that's going to make me really question. It's more about, what is your passion for serving our students? How are you going to do that? What are the ways that you do that? How are you flexing to really meet the students where they are? That's critical. For me, that's absolutely critical. The other part is, if you're showing absolutely no passion and you're deadpan in the interview, I'm thinking about hundreds and hundreds of students who are going to sit in your classes. And if you're not demonstrating that passion to us, it's important. I'm looking for
I think R&D wants our attention.
That's another factor, especially in the interview. Technology might screw up. You'll always be prepared for that.
Yeah, have definitely 2-3 backups so that you can move. And I've seen technology go south right in the middle of an interview. That's okay, don't panic. Some of the best interviews of people we've hired are people who recovered when the technology crashed, when something awful happened, because it happens in the classroom.
We like to hire survivors.
Exactly, because there are days you come in and the computer's broken and you have this great plan or something terrible happens. So, just don't panic if that happens. And I'd also say, I've actually seen candidates apologize after their teaching demonstration. I would suggest that's not a good idea. If you didn't do your best, and maybe you keep yourself on a very, up to a very high standard, and maybe you gave 80% and you didn't give 100, to us, we don't know the difference, so you don't have to point out your every flaw. I do see people do that. Well, I haven't taught that class, and I haven't taught this class, and I'm not really prepared. Rather than look at the potential or your passion for doing it or how you are qualified.
And in fact, that kind of thing, if it was something that you were not that qualified, I look forward to working with my colleagues to draw from their strengths and everything to work on it. It's maybe one of those schmaltzy answers, but it's just like you want to work with your colleagues also. You all develop your strengths together.
And something else is critical about
That technology.
About second round, I do want to reiterate this. There are faculty here, and you've heard several folks on the panel today say that they went for positions 4, 5, 6 times. I said it at the very beginning, it doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. There are a variety of reasons why one person's selected and you're not. I cannot think of a time in second round interview where we thought, why did they send this person? You have competed hard to get into the interview process, that's already a bonus. What that tells you is that your paperwork and your experience is enough to get an interview. Then your job is, as Dean said, to hit it out of the park and be prepared. For second round, it might be, I like using ESL as an example. You have 2 candidates that have, both outstanding, but one of them has expertise in speaking and listening, and the other one has expertise in writing, but we happen to have a need in speaking and listening, We're going to hire that person because that's where the need is. If you have expertise in calculus, but we need basic arithmetic right now, we're going to go with the person who's meeting the needs of that department. So it's very important. That doesn't mean you should give up and never try again, or that you're somehow fundamentally flawed, or we don't like you, or you failed. Because I have so many people who will say, I failed. I will just tell you, sitting in that room as I do, and I will go through right now, there are 22 positions. I would be in second round for every single candidate. It breaks my heart because a lot of times I wish we had 2 positions, 3 positions, because folks are excellent. We have to make our best decision-making based on everything about teaching, about collegiality, about what you can bring to the college, about the needs of that college. It might be a discipline that is, maybe all the faculty members are male, and there's a female candidate. That's important for our students. I mean, there are a lot of factors that go into play. It might be an all-female department and we have a male candidate. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking for. It's a variety of factors. I have not seen somebody come in and just blow it, or us just think, boy, that person's awful, they shouldn't even be here. So I know those tapes are natural, kind of go through people's minds, and somehow you failed. Go back and try again. I love it. I don't want to mention names, but I mean, last year, I know that we hired somebody who I have personally interviewed at least 6, 7 times at more than one college, who I finally got to give the yes to. So, I love being able to give the yes. So don't give up. That's the number one thing I would say. Don't give up. And I would say also, even if you're really set on being here, spread your wings a little. Apply at other institutions, go on those interviews. It's a good experience, and you never know what could work out. Sometimes that might help you to be more competitive. We've had people here who, I've got an offer now over at such and such college. We're thinking, we don't want them to get you, we're hiring you. So, those kinds of things come into play. So don't give up.
Well, and the other thing is, sometimes people will go and work for another institution, they'll get a job and they're not tied to Sacramento. They'll work somewhere for a couple years, and then that job position will become available, and then they'll apply. And then they have adjunct and full-time experience, and they come back, which just makes them a more exciting candidate in terms of there they are, selling themselves, they have that experience, and they're like, I really wanted to come back to American River.
And you'll get asked about college service, and I would say even if you haven't had the opportunity to participate in college service, some people come from very large departments and it's difficult. That doesn't mean you can't still attend meetings of things that you're interested in. It doesn't mean that you can't say, I'm really interested in curriculum. I haven't had the opportunity to be the representative, but I would really like to be involved in curriculum because, I like looking at CORs or whatever. There are a lot of ways to present your interests and how you would contribute to the department. That's extremely important. And if you haven't thought about that, look at our new governance structure. Look at the kinds of things we're involved in because your colleagues are looking at, it's the future of the department. The hires that we're making are for decades. And we want to know what your vision is. We want to know how you're going to participate and what you're going to bring. And it doesn't always have to be experience, but it is, what is it that you bring especially? What is it, the lens that you want to focus on? That's important for us to know.
It can be a real challenge to be on the merry-go-round multiple times without grabbing the brass ring. And all of us who have tried multiple times and didn't get it first time out, because most of us don't get it the first time out, you have to treat it as a learning experience. And you also need to keep this in mind. I think most of us appreciate this, but may not acknowledge it frequently. I'm sure the deans know, and the full-time faculty know this as well. We actually can't function without a robust part-time presence. The adjunct faculty make it possible for the institution to function. It's the cohort that fills in what we can't do. We've already hired you as adjunct faculty, meaning that we know you're qualified to teach the students. What we haven't done yet is validate you at the level of, full-time instructor, which is nice. I like it very, very much, and I don't blame you for wanting it. But you have already been judged competent to teach our students. We'd love to have more of you teach full-time to the degree that we can have more slots. But Lisa's made it very clear that if you don't get the position, it can be for any number of reasons. The mere fact that you get an interview means you've been raised to a level where we've already said, this is a person who could do it, and we've singled you out from the population as someone who can go to this next level. And if you get through the interview and go to the second round, then we're saying, oh my God, not only have we judged you as ready to be full-time, we've recommended you to the president as someone we know we can work with. And then you go to the president and he picks somebody else because he has his own reasons and his own priorities, and you need to come back until the president says, yes, this time it's you, because that's what a bunch of us did. And I hope you keep that in mind. You have the qualifications.
I have two comments. I do want to say something about that's really important for second round interviews. If you don't get the job when you get the call, and I'll just say I think this is true for any college. Your reaction is extremely important. I've had candidates blow up, scream at me. I've had people break down and cry. I've had people say, thank you, it was a great honor to be in the second round interview. You're still being interviewed for next time. So don't forget that, because you might be really ticked off. I would advise you not to take that out on the person giving the call to you, whoever that is. I'm not saying it just for myself, but I'm saying, I will say with our former VP, she would definitely remember if somebody, just was extraordinarily angry or bitter about the process. It says something to us about you as a colleague. And it's okay to be disappointed. I don't expect people to be elated. Thank you, I didn't get the job. I don't like making those phone calls either. They're very painful. And I understand when somebody's, I know that they're crying, I know they're upset, but I also appreciate when they say, thank you so much for letting me know. I understand. And I'm just throwing that out there. So how you respond in that situation is also important. So.
It's a quick question on background for CV. Is it helpful to have community service or community outreach, like outside the college?
Yes,
sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And on the application.
Definitely.
If you've gotten an interview before, do you keep like the same type of cover letter? And then if you've gotten to the second round before, do you repeat yourself? Do you do the same exact thing that you said in the first round?
That's always a tough one, and you got to think about your audience. Who's reading it? Do they expect it? I wouldn't reinvent the entire thing, but sometimes you go and you update, you come with a slightly different angle in the first, paragraph or something if it's possible. But again, Again, in English, there's going to be a higher expectation. How creative are you? What are you going to do now? But, in sociology, think of your group. What do you think it's going to be? It's they're writers, and there's that expectation. But so think about, parts of it. Certainly you're going to put in maybe a paragraph of different experience you've had. Or, there's been a lot of changes in the college. Think about our Achieving the Dream mission. Certainly, coming up with a paragraph and showing that you've read some things on the website and how you think you have a great fit for it would show I've updated my letter in a way that I'm staying up with the college.
Who the vice president is and the president is critical for you to know. I worked with Colleen for 11 years. I'm a completely different vice president than Colleen in terms of what my focus is, how I approach instruction, what I'm looking for in terms of instructions, how we're building the college for the future. So I would say audience is critical. And do your homework. I would say that if I were in your shoes and when I was in your shoes, I'd be doing research. Who is the president? Who are the vice president? Who are the people who are in the room? What are the things that they're looking for? What they're interested in? Where's the college right now? Because that will tell you a lot about